Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and Chag Sameach. This is the festival of Shavuot, and on Shavuot, we read the book of Ruth. Ruth is a very short book, one of the shortest in the Tanakh. It's only 4 chapters, and it comes in the third section of the Tanakh called the Writings, the Ch in Tanakh, Ketuvim. And you may know from Bibles published by Christian publishing houses that Ruth is placed not towards the end of the Bible, but towards the beginning with the book of Judges, because the story takes place in the time of the Judges. But it is a very late book. Why do we read Ruth at this time? Ruth chose a life of Torah. And so she becomes for us a symbol of taking upon oneself a life of holiness, a life of loyalty to the Jewish people. We may say with our ancient commentators that she is the archetypical convert. And in fact, many women who convert to Judaism are given the name Bat Ruth, daughter of Ruth, for their choices. Ruth is a Moabite. Moab is a traditional enemy of the ancient Israelites. And yet, how does she come to marry an Israelite man? Well, Naomi and her husband Elimelech and their 2 sons leave the territory of Judah because of a famine. And they move to Moab in order to survive. And famine is a recurring motif in our Bible, in the Torah, as well as in later books, and how we respond in times of famine and how our neighbors around us respond is one of those themes in this particular book that take on special, acute meaning in a time like the one we are living in. Because the famine is not just a result of weather, of drought, but also of how those in power use the resources they have to feed or to withhold food from their people. And we know that in many, many cases around the world today, that famine is not a problem of the amount of food available, but it is a problem of the resource and the control of the resource, that food is there, but not everyone has access to it. And this is the story that sets the scene for the book of Ruth. And when Ruth, who is the widowed daughter-in-law of Naomi, when Ruth and Naomi come back to Judah after their husbands have died, after Ruth has made her commitment to Naomi, they find that not only are things better for everyone else, but they're worse for them because they are destitute. Not only are they destitute, but Ruth is a foreigner. And so she carries a double burden, not just poverty, but foreignness. Are they to be ostracized and excluded? Will Naomi be welcomed back into the clan because she now has a foreign daughter-in-law? What will happen to Ruth as a poor foreigner? You might think that I'm being a little obvious and heavy-handed in encouraging you to make a connection to the inequalities of our society today and the stigmatization of those who are refugees and foreigners. But it's not a stretch at all, because that's who Ruth is, and that's who Naomi is. She is very poor, and she is at the mercy of the society around her. Even though she is one of them, she has nothing. But she does have tradition on her side. And we see that Boaz, who is a relative in Naomi's husband's family, Boaz will show us the way in accepting not only this foreigner, but also in how he uses the resources of food that he controls to ensure that Ruth and Naomi are fed and are protected. So the book of Ruth becomes, in our day, a very powerful message about community resources, about welcoming, about who's in and who's out. Who do we accept? Who do we protect? How do we protect them? How do we manage and share our resources? And of course, the book of Ruth turns out very happily. And so this is also a strong message for us. We can say that it's a beautiful love story on many levels. The love that Naomi and Ruth have for each other, their loyalty, Ruth's loyalty to her mother in law, the strength of women in sticking together and persevering, and the love that will develop between Ruth and Boaz's love for justice and for his extended family, that he rises to the occasion. He knows full well that the obligation to take care of Ruth as it falls on a kinsman is about her as a person, not just about the potential of the land that would have belonged to her husband, to her father in law. So Boaz really is a hero in this story, but as a message of how we shepherd our resources, how we bring each other together, and particularly shown through the example of gleaning, which the Torah tells us, particularly in Parshat Kedoshim, in the book of Leviticus, chapter 19, that holiness includes leaving the corners of your field for the poor to glean. And we see that Boaz's fields are gleaned by the poor, just as is described in the Torah. So even though the book of Ruth is written hundreds of years after the Torah, that story about gleaning, that story about the dignity of the poor, that story about sharing resources, that everyone is responsible for the health of the community, those ring true in the book of Ruth and ring true for us and serve as a very powerful reminder for us today. There is a saying in Jewish tradition, Kol Yisrael Aravim Ze Bazeh, all Israel are responsible for one another. But in the kind of society where we live, where we are not separate and where we value and honor and cherish our integration with the larger American society, we could also say, Kol Anashim Aravim Ze Bazeh, all people are responsible for one another, that the health of the entire community depends on each and every one of us, how we hold on to what we have, how we share what we have, how we ensure that the community as a whole is safe and secure. These are the stories of Ruth, and they are the outcome of her choice to be one of the Jewish people, to accept the benefits, the blessings of the covenant of Torah, but also the responsibility of being an ethical person, of being one who has compassion for others, just as she has for her mother-in-law. So she takes on a place in the community where she knows that will be required of her for everyone. So the book of Ruth, short as it is, really, really speaks to every generation and every society. And particularly its message, at least for me, resonates so loudly this year in particular. I hope that you will read the Book of Ruth. I hope that you will see um, how Ruth expresses these thoughts, these ideas, these values of what it means to be one of the Jewish people. May your Shabbat be restful, restorative. May this festival of Shavuot, where we celebrate the giving and the receipt of Torah, Matan Torah, the gift of Torah, may that reach into your heart, cheer you, sustain you, and bless you. Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach.